Here's a book where I keep notes of all my board games. But I also, which last time I checked, I was at $831 games. Now, it's tabletop gaming, so it has board games, card games, etc. And I may have a couple of repeats in here. I'm not sure, but most of the time, if a game has multiple copies or multiple types of the same game, I don't write that down. That being said, that's not what this video is about, but this video is going to actually be about me discussing the game of Risk. The game of Risk. There's a lot of versions of it out there. And I'm going to talk about it. The game of Risk. I have a lot of copies, but then when I started researching about it, oh my gosh, there's more out there than I knew. So, stay tuned. Apologize for being sick. Alright, the original Risk game was actually called Le Conquest du Monde. It was in 1957. Original Risk game came out in 1957, and it wasn't even created by Risk. It wasn't even called Risk. It was called La Conquest du Monde. It's Latin, I guess. Basically, conquest of the world. Then Parker Brothers bought that for their company, and they created in 1959 the first Risk game. Now after that, they've created a whole lot of Risk games. They've had Castle Risk. They've had which was its first. Castle Risk was the first, basically, second Risk. It was Castle Risk was pretty much the first Risk sequel, so to speak. It was created in 1986, my birthday, right? So that's cool. Then they had a Risk Napoleon edition. It was like Castle Risk, but while Castle Risk was in Europe during the medieval times, Napoleon Risk was during the diplomatic era times. I don't have that one. I'd like to get it. They also created an Ottoman Empire expansion to the Napoleon edition Risk. Pretty cool. Now that came out in 1999. Then they had a 40th anniversary edition, which I believe I have that one. It's cool. It has metal tin pieces. It's pretty cool. The box though is still cardboard, so I don't know. That's kind of weird. If y'all would like to see these particular editions, I can always easily take pictures and do a slideshow or something of that nature. But it will have to be more than one slideshow, is, you know, they only allow you 50 something. I don't know why they only allow you 50. Anyway, then there was in 2001 they made a 2210 AD Risk. It's pretty good. It's basically Risk set in the future. Still plays pretty much mostly close to regular Risk, except for has one little difference. I think they started adding a little bit of cards to it, but the main thing they added was, like, I think 4 territories. Start off in the game with a nuclear token on it, and it's like they're impassable or whatever. Anyway, it's pretty cool. Risk. Then and that was in 2001, and then the next year in 2003. Sometimes my dates will be a little bit different, but anyway, 2003, they came up with a Lord of the Rings risk, which was actually their first Lord of the Rings risk. Was their first risk based off of a movie or television franchise, and now they do it all the time. Lord of the Rings, they made multiple ones too. First, they made Lord of the Rings Risk, which only had 2, which was only based off the first 2 movies. Then they made the trilogy. Then they made a Mordor expansion when the 3rd one came out. Then they made a trilogy edition. So that's pretty cool. Then in 2004, they made... So these were in 2002 and 2003. 2004, they made Risk Godstorm. Risk Godstorm went back to just basically Europe. But it went to Europe and it created, and this is the first case, 2210 AD had leaders. That's what they added. They added cards and they added leaders, special generals. And they also added water territories in 2210 AD. That's what they added that was different. Commanders, general leaders. They kept those leaders for Lord of the Rings too. In Godstorm, they kept those leaders, but those leaders were the gods. Each faction, I think there's 4 or 5 or something of that name. Anyway, they had their sky god, their magic god, their death god, and their war god. I think that's the only gods they had. They also added Atlantis and an ability to sink Atlantis or destroy Atlantis. So that's pretty cool. That came out in 2004. Now, then they had 2 Star Wars. Well, they've actually had 3 Star Wars risks. They had the first one in 2005 was Star Wars: The Clone Wars. I have several copies of it. I probably even have a video of it somewhere. Then they had Star Wars: The Original Trilogy. Same with it. Okay. Then they had a Risk Express. It was a dice game. It was part of the dice games that they created for. They made like a Clue, a Life, Monopoly, I think a Sorry. They made a couple of these dice games. They called them Express. They were like a travel edition version that you could play with just dice of these classic games. Problem with Risk Express is it wasn't released in the United States, so I don't have it. Weird. I have some Express dice games. I think I have like Monopoly and Sorry and something else, but they made some other ones. Oh, and the 3rd Star Wars Risk they made was pretty recently. They made a, it was in, well, actually they made a 4th one, which I have yet to find any information about, except for that it exists. I haven't yet seen any pictures. They made a Star Wars Saga edition in the United Kingdom. I'm not sure if it's added clone and original trilogy together, or if it's just a rethemed version of the original trilogy. I've yet to find anything about it. And then, of course, they made the Star Wars Risk that was basically episode 6? 4 or 6? Anyway, it was basically the assault on the Death Star and the Endor planet. The moon of Endor's attack. And the battle between Luke, the Emperor, and Darth Vader. That's basically it. So technically, I think there's 5 Star Wars risks. Oh, man. Now, another one that was a United Kingdom exclusive. Them Europeans always getting stuff that we don't get. Anyway, was the first Risk Junior. I guess for those who they thought Lord of the Rings was too complicated, they made a Risk Junior Narnia. Chronicles of Narnia. It's actually just called Risk Junior Narnia. It's basically based off of the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe movie. From, the movie. When the movie had its sequel, they didn't even make a Risk Junior sequel. They didn't make a Prince Caspian. No, sorry. Now, then they made a 2-player Risk. It was called Balance of Power. It was basically European Black Ops. They made a Black Ops edition, which there was only 1,000 copies. Then they remade the Black Ops edition and created what it's either called. It's called Revised or Revolution or Reinvention or whatever. They did all that. And then they even made a classic 1959 copy. They even... so it was basically a reprint of the 1959 copy. So it was called the Vintage Edition Risk. Woo! Being sick's not fun. There were they had a special edition that was called Onyx Edition. Then in 2008 and 9, I believe, they made, 1 year or 2 years, they're either a year or 2 years apart, but first they made a Halo Wars, which was in 2009. And in Halo Wars, you play on the map of Arcadia, I think. It's a pretty cool, it's a Risk-themed, I believe this was the first one they made based off of a video game franchise. First Risk based on a video game franchise. It was so popular that they made a legendary version. The legendary version, you get to play on the ring map. But also the maps flip over and you can play like little 2-player games, or you can play Risk 2-player versions, skirmish battle type deals on the maps. Or if you do like me and have all 3, and we'll have have 2 copies of Legendary and 1 of Wars, you can actually use the teleportation little things they have to put where you can create a way where you can get from one board to another. I've also been thinking about creating maybe a spaceship thing, which they have in some other versions of Risk. They have spaceships. Well, it's not really a spaceship. It's a ship. They have a ship in Marvel Cinematic Universe Risk and a ship in Metal Gear Solid. But I haven't got to those yet. Then, of course, they had, which I have both of those, by the way, and I have both of these Transformer ones too, by the way. They have Risk Transformers Battle of Cybertron. It came out in 2007. The recent one came out like last year, and it was Transformers Decepticon Invasion of Earth. One you play on the Cybertronian map. It's cool. Other one you play on Earth. The one on the Cybertronian map is just basically Autobots versus Decepticons. You play a certain amount of rounds, and whoever owns the launch pad at the particular time the rounds are over with gets the wins. But you can always play it to World Conquest. And then Decepticon Invasion of Earth. The Decepticons have to take over a certain amount of humans, and they conquer the world. But when they do that, there's like 3 factions of Decepticons and 1 faction of Autobots that's helping the humans try to defend Earth. But the Decepticons are not, while they do win when the world is conquered, they are not united. So they can't fight each other. So it's like free for all. Then I don't know when they made it, but there's a Risk Factions out there, and it's a video game app or whatever. And then, like I said, in 2011, they made a Metal Gear Solid Risk, which has this extra faction. It has this extra faction that's kind of like a neutral faction, and they are on board the ship. The ship's called Outer Haven. Outer Haven has 6 docking locations, and it has like 3 extra territories. So you have to invade Outer Haven from one of the docking stations, but each turn a person rolls a die, and it moves from wherever it is to the other number that's rolled on that die, which is pretty cool. Now, me personally, I have 3 copies of this one, and I would like to get 3. Well, actually, I really don't need 3 more complete copies, but I'd be willing to trade a board, maybe an extra set of cards, in exchange for the ship and the ship people. The ship and the ship people. Now, with 3D printing, I probably can do that myself. I could probably print off 3 more ships. I want 3 more ships, and there's a reason. There's a reason why I want 3 more ships, and why I want the people to go with it. If I had 3 more ships, I could create a whole entire 6th faction in the game, because I'd have the people for them and everything. Then each faction would actually start off the game owning their own Outer Haven, and I would create a system where Outer Havens could attack each other. They would be on one piece of land, and they would roll that die, and they could attack that other Outer Haven ship. I might create a way where there's like some sea zones or something, so that the ships can move off of their main point. I might even throw away the rule when it comes to 6 ports, because that's kind of silly. I might just make any like that's another thing they added in Lord of the Rings, was they added a port system. That was the first time they added a port system. You could attack one country from another country if they were connected via port. So what I want is 3 more ships, so that every faction can own their own Outer Haven. And they would start off owning one, which would be pretty cool. And there would be up to 6 players now in the game, so this would be a new faction. And, which could, and they could, basically, it would be more. I'd have to create some special rules for, the ship movements. Like, I guess they would start off in one of their locations, but I would probably have to create some sea zone systems or something for it. But anyway, it's pretty cool. Metal Gear Solid. Then they made a Legacy. Now, Legacy is pretty cool because it's like 2210 AD, sort of, because it's set in the future, but not really. It's cool because every time you play the game, you create new things to the game. And the new things, there's new things you'll open up, there's new cards that you'll get, there's new packages you'll open up, there's new factions sometimes that will even pop out depending on what you do. There's stickers you'll place on the board, you'll get to name cities, you'll get to name continents, you'll get to name territories, I don't know about, not territories, but you'll get to literally write on the board, put stickers on the board, and you play for like 15 games, I think. And whoever has won the most game is the leader of that world. You even get to name the planet when you're done. It's amazing. It's cool. it has all this great, amazing stuff. It's just cool. There's stuff that you'll get. You can even rip and tear up cards. There's cards you'll get to put new coins on them. You'll get to, and they've made all kinds of, for both 221080 and Legacy, they have made expansions for 221080 has a couple of official expansions that are out of print, but people have created their own like PDFs and stuff you can get. And Legacy, people have also created their own like little expansions for these games because they love these two games. That's why. Now, there's also a StarCraft. Now, StarCraft, in my humble opinion, StarCraft is essentially a retheme version of Star Wars, the original trilogy edition. I know it's based off a video game. Yeah, it's based off a video game. It's based on the StarCraft video game. But why do I say... No, wait. Is it StarCraft or is it Mass Effect? It's Mass Effect, I believe. Anyway, both of them are kind of rethemes. They take elements of the Star Wars risk that they created. Both of them do. Mass Effect Galaxy at War. I think that one's the rethemed. Anyway, it has the exact... Oh, the Star Wars one I'm talking about, you can have the Death Star. And this is why you will know what I'm talking about when I'm saying the Death Star. In StarCraft or Mass Effect, you have... Yeah, I think it's Mass Effect. The Empire has the Death Star. Well, the Harbingers, they have the Harbinger. Does exactly the same thing. You can blow up planets with it. It's amazing. Mass Effect has Cerberus. It's like a neutral faction that you can own. It's trying to get resource planets. In Star Wars, in the original trilogy, they have the Hutts, which are trying to get resource planets. It's basically it's a complete retheme and compatible with each other. It's amazing. StarCraft, it's just like a risk with other planets. Actually, you could kind of maybe throw it in with 2210 AD if you wanted to, and have your Space Commander, because 2210 AD comes with a moon base, which is cool. Comes with a moon, so you could actually have your Space Commander, that is what you need to get to the moon, go to these other planets in StarCraft. I mean, yeah. Anyway, then they had a Walking Dead risk, not based off of the TV show, even though they used the TV show to probably promote the game. It's actually based off of the Walking Dead comics, but most people knew about the TV show, so they probably used the TV show to influence it, which, to get people to buy it, even though it's based off the comics. And it's only based, like, it's really a risk that's been broken down so small that it's just literally one city. It's like literally one city. So each person and each zombie probably actually represents not an army, but an actual person in this game. Or maybe a small band of survivor group, like 5 or something. It's cool. It creates a very interesting and unique method of its survival edition, because you're not really trying to take over the world, the planet, the city. You're trying to stay in the game until a certain amount of rounds without getting overrun by the zombie horde, which comes at you every turn and gets bigger every round and bigger every round and bigger, and it don't stop. Just like the latest one that was a GameStop exclusive, Risk, Call of Duty Zombies. They pretty much kept that mechanism from Walking Dead and put it in that one with the zombies. It's hard because the zombies get bigger and bigger. Then they made a Plants vs. Zombies in 2013. So, it's pretty cool. Plants vs. Zombies. It's kind of a 2-player Risk with these gnomes that someone could play, but they are neutral. But then on the other side, it has a way to actually play basically the Plants vs. Zombies video game skirmish in a board game format. Why? Because they can. That's why. Pretty cool. Pretty cool game. They have one based off of Battlefield Rogue. Don't even know why they call it Risk, because in actuality, it's not Risk. I mean, you have a squad of soldiers, and you do missions, and a board that can be multiply changed against another enemy who has a squad of soldiers. And each group, there's like 4 different squads of soldiers. And you can customize your soldiers where you can have certain people as certain types of soldiers, if that's understood. So, it's called Risk, Battlefield Rogue. It's based off the video game Battlefield Rogue, and they have like, I don't know, probably 10 copies. I don't know how many copies they got. They weren't freaking on sale, okay? Come on. Like, cheap. Like, less than like $1 or something. Cheap. When I got a bunch of copies. Plus, they have the dice where they have sticker dice, so I was like, I could make all kinds of combos of new dice with these different sets. Plus, pieces, I can increase my squads to having whole entire armies fight whole entire other armies. And I could make the map bigger. So, yeah, that's other reasons. Now, they also created a Doctor Who Risk, which lasts until all the doctors, shows all the doctors until the female doctor. And each round, you move the doctor, and you move the TARDIS onto a different country, and the Daleks are trying to invade Earth. I don't really get it. But you're playing one of the Dalek factions, and you're supposed to conquer Earth before the Doctor rejuvenates, like, 13 sometimes. I have it, but just got it because it's Risk. I didn't get it because I like Doctor Who. Got it because it's Risk. Then they have a cool one that's Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones, pretty cool. It's pretty cool because you get like 7 factions. And there is a PDF of people who've made a White Walker expansion. They've made a White Walker expansion. So they've created another faction for the game. Winners is coming expansion. Anyway, there's like 7 factions. They all fight. You can play a 3-player map, and then there's like a 5-player map, and then there's like 2 boards, so you can combine them. There's like Westeros and Essos, and you can combine them and create like double the maps or whatever it's called. Anyway, it's just this big, huge, takes up the whole entire table game of Risk, and it has the same port system that Lord of the Rings had, where you have ports, and you can attack one port to another port. Plus, it has like leaders. But the leaders work as like cards where you're allowed to use them if you spend money. Which is, the leaders have special abilities that you have to pay money to use. And then you gotta wait a turn, your next turn before you're allowed to use that. You're only allowed to use their ability like once or whatever. I mean, it's interesting, but I don't really grasp the concept of that too much. Then, of course, I was talking about Star Wars. the newer one. They also have a black series of that because they, at the time they were doing a black series, everything was Star Wars. Then I got the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And then, for some reason, they made a cash grab, Captain America Civil War, which I think I have 1 or 2 copies of that. Probably have 2 copies because I bought one outright, and then I bought like another one on clearance or something. I guess it didn't sell very good. Anyway, Marvel Cinematic Universe has a secondary card game, dice chucking type game that you play on the back of it, where it's like where you try to. It's like a Guardians of the Galaxy theme thing. It's kind of silly. It's just something they threw in to try to, sell it. But it's an interesting game because it is an interesting game. And I don't know if I'm on part 2 now or not. But anyway, it's a very interesting game. I am on Marvel Cinematic Universe and Captain America Civil War. Both of them are very interesting games. Civil War, you play as one side or the other. It's like a 2-player game, and you're trying to find and arrest or find and save Bucky, basically. You play as Captain America's side or Iron Man's side. Basically, it's the movie. The whole entire thing is the movie. It's set in the airport. It's the movie. Then the Marvel Cinematic Universe edition is pretty cool. It's it takes up all the movies till Civil War, and it kind of combines different parts and elements to him. Loki's in there. He has you got to find each faction has their own like special things. There's like the helicarrier, which has shield agents, but they might be Hydra agents. They might be shield agents, but they might be Hydra agents. Loki's in there. Hulk, Hulk moves each turn and he gets mad and angry and he attacks everybody. He's like a neutral faction that one player gets control when Hulk busts loose. You got like Ultron in there. You got like Captain America's forces, Iron Man's forces, and every faction has like 3 leaders that help them out. You got like shield agents and / Hydra agents on board the helicarrier, which you got to take over. And each faction has to like different things. Like Iron Man has to build the Avengers Tower. Like Captain America has to like Thor, he's in the game and he has to like take over. You have Sokovia is Washington D.C.'s in there, but it's mostly basically everything happening in Manhattan. But there's a couple other areas you can go. Like you can try to take over the helicarrier. You can try to take over the Sokovia. You can try to take over. Anyway, it's every fact. Thor has to find Loki. Iron Man has to build like the towers. There's a Bucky faction, which I call it the Hydra Bucky faction. Captain America Shield faction. It's just so it's cool. I mean, what more are you guys say? I think I'm on part 2 of this video. If not, this is allowing me to record a lot longer than 32 minutes. It's normally They made another one in 2016. They made a Europe edition one that's just Europe. Sorry, folks. They made a Star Trek 50th Anniversary edition, I believe, before they made the 2016 edition. That was cool. It has tribbles. You gotta love it. Tribbles! Star Trek 50th Anniversary edition. You get to play as all the captains. It basically uses the same captain and captain's crews. All the captains from all the legendary Star Trek movies, except the movies and series, except the new movies. J.J. Abrams, his version of Star Trek's not in there. Someone should make an expansion for his version. And Discovery's not in there. Someone should make an expansion for Discovery. But, basically, so you got Q, put them all together in like a holographic simulation. And while you go and take over and attack each other, it's not war. It uses the theme that you're making peace treaties. And in some certain planets have alien races on them, and you have to go and defeat the alien race to be able to claim that planet. But while you're defeating the alien race or attacking each other and defeating each other to take over planets and areas, and 4 quadrants of Star Trek universe, they're claiming you're taking over the planet not to commit an act of war, but to create a peace treaty on that planet. It has cards. The crew members can do certain things. You get money, even though in Star Trek it's like no money and there's a socialist society. So I'm not sure how that works out, where you got money when you shouldn't have money. Anyway, the point is, you got money. So you got money, or actually it's like command ships or something. You use that to be able to pay to like be able to do certain things and buy cards and whatnot. But it works the exact same system as the Game of Thrones does. The Game of Thrones, each house has their own little board, and it has like 5 or something family members of that house who then you can put cards on and use their special abilities and whatnot. Anyway, then they made a Rick and Morty. There's a Rick and Morty risk. I believe I've done videos of this. Most of these risks I have. I mean, a lot of them I have, and I've probably done videos, so check out my risk playlist. There's Rick and Morty risk, which, well, it's just a silly themed risk version for Rick and Morty. That's basically what I can say about it. It's cool. It's cool. Then there are some risks out there that I do not own, and I'm trying to get a hold of and acquire. They have a Vikings one out, based off of the TV series Vikings. They have an Assassin's Creed risk based off of the video game franchise Assassin's Creed. So I'm not sure how that one's going to work out, because Assassin's Creed goes from the beginning of history to now. It has a whole entire different version of history than we have. So I'm not sure how that's going to work out. Then there's supposed to be a Skyrim, the Elder Scrolls version out there. Another one based off a video game. I would love to get it. There's supposed to be a Battle for Medieval England edition. I'm not sure about that one. There's supposed to be a Hasbro Junior Risk out there. And like I was saying earlier about the expansions, there's a lot of 2210 AD Risks expansions. There's Frontline. It has like a Mars thing, bunch of other stuff. Parker Brothers has made all kinds of different ones. Sometimes there's a little bit different with the boards or whatever. They did, of course, 1959, 1963, 1975, 1980, 1990, 1993, 1999, and 2003. Parker Brothers has made all kinds of different editions of them. Then there's this Target exclusive one out there that just seems silly, fun to get, called Office Politics. And then, of course, I was talking about La Quantes de Monde at the beginning of the game. And Anyway, now in Brazil, they have it's like Risk, but they call it War. And they have the very first copy of War came out in 1992. It's like Risk, but different. It's got some parts are the same, some parts are different. They got a War 2 that came out in 1981. They actually made, and it looks different. So there's another Risk out there, but it's called War. And it's based off episode 1 of Star Wars. And it actually does, I found pictures of it, and it does look different from Star Wars, the original trilogy edition, Star Wars, the Clone Wars edition. It totally looks different. It does look different. But it's in Brazil. It's Star Wars Episode 1, which came out in 1991, of course. Then there's War Junior. There's a War Imperio Romano. It's a war based in the Roman Empire times. The War Battle of Mythologicals. It's a Risk themed in a mythical Greek mythology Europe. Kind of like Risk Godstorm, but just with one faction of gods. There's a War Vikings, which is not even the same as the new Risk Vikings. Then there's some Ristco. There's SPQ Risco. These are a bunch of different ones I had to look up. I found them. There's Risco, which was 1968 and 77. It's basically regular Risk. There's Risco PAL, which is it's a different languages version of Castle Risk. There's a Future Risco. It's in 1990. It came out in 1992. It's basically more of a modern version of Risk. There's a Risco Enzyme. There's a Risk Card. It's a card game version of Risk and came out in 96. There's a Risco Mater. It came out in 2002, and it has a system where you can change the boards around somehow. So you could change the boards; they'd flip over. They have different scenes areas. So I guess you're not going against the world. I'm not sure. Then there was a Risco Express. This is basically same as Risk Express, but Risco is like French or Italian or the European versions of it or whatever. There's Magnifico, which is not a Risk, but it was created by one of the same people who created Risco. One of these Risco games. So that's why I put it down. It's basically Art of War. And then there's a Risco Junior, 2009. The other one was 2007. Risco Challenge. It's a 2-player. It came out in 2010. It's the tournament edition of Risk. It's Risco Pocket. It's like a travel edition of Risk. Risco's Stormtrooping. It's basically the original version of Risk. Then there's a Risco Z, which came in 2017. It's basically a zombie Risk. Risco Prestige. It's a deluxe Risk. There's Risk Astrax. It's a French version. It's based on a cartoon character in France. Believe it or not, a cartoon comic book character set in the Mediterranean basin. Interesting, huh? Interesting. Then there's, of course, a Medieval Risk, which is it's a type of expansion for Europe or Castle Risk that's an unofficial Risk. There's also another unofficial Risk called Hyborian Risk, which was in Space Gamer number 37, pages 16 and 17, copyright 1981, and it's basically Risk set in the Conan the Barbarian universe. Then there's another game called Over the Trenches, which is a World War I version of Risk, sort of. A Risk based on World War I. Then there's a Risk 2012, which is a modern pieces. These, I believe all these are unofficial ones. There's the Chaos Risk, which is in 2017. It's a unofficial game. Then there's a World Domination, which is a card game based sort of that uses Risk cards and only the Risk cards to do it. There's a European Risk, which was 2018, that had no dice. It's a Risk without dice. And then there's expansions to various different expansions to different Risks that people have created and whatnot. So that's all the Risk games that I know of. If you know of some more, comment down below. If you have any of these, comment down below. And remember, guys, good all the time. All the time, guys, good. Keep on gaming. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. Jesus loves you. Jesus is God. And everybody have a great, wonderful, amazing